If we're supposed to be hearing opinionated minds, we're not.
Of artificial intelligence in the area of predictive policing. Now, each team will have 5 speaking members. The affirmative team, which is Opinionated Minds, affirms the resolution and is calling for a change in the status quo, and therefore also bears the burden of proof and demonstrating why and how present conditions could be improved by their proposed solution. The negative team, Suffolk University, actively opposes the resolution and refutes the affirmative team's arguments on the grounds that their proposed plan does not represent a measurable improvement upon the status quo. The negative team is not, however, obligated to defend the status quo and can, in fact, optionally propose a counterplan of their own if they so choose. At this event, we have a tremendous panel of 3 judges. We have Stéphane Bouchard, who is a former BC and Harvard debate coach, and who is also an authority on using AI in educational settings. We also have with us Dr. Ron Green, professor of communications at the University of Minnesota, and also a former department head there, and who is also the planner for the Alta Argumentation Conference this summer. Finally, we have Dr. Kate Palczewski, professor at the University of Northern Iowa, who was an outstanding Northwestern debater in her own right, and is also on the National Debate Tournament Board of Trustees. All right, so with that, I will now start the debate, and we will begin with the affirmative team's first constructive argument by Kristen Mathewson. Kristen is from Enfield, Connecticut. She's currently working as a service dog trainer here at the facility, and she has earned degrees in business management and nursing. She's also finishing up a human services degree and is a mother of 4. So, Kristen.
According to the Washington Post, in an article written by Katie Sullivan in 2025 called "Arrested by AI," quote, at least 8 people in the United States have been wrongfully arrested after being identified by facial recognition technology. All those cases were eventually dropped by prosecutors, but only after the suspects fought to clear their names. Of those 8 people, 6 of them are Black. Christopher Gatlin was one of those men, and he subsequently spent 17 months in jail before his case was dropped, end quote. Alexandria Stanford, a writer for the Innocence Project, wrote in 2024, quote, there has been concern that FRT and other artificial intelligence technologies will exacerbate racial inequities in policing and the criminal legal system. Research shows that facial recognition software is significantly less reliable for people of color, especially Black and Asian people, as algorithms struggle to distinguish facial features and darker skin tones. Another study concluded that disproportionate arrests of Black people by law enforcement agencies using FRT may be the result of the lack of Black faces in the algorithms training data sets. I believe that these programs are infallible and the tendency of officers' own biases to magnify these issues. Last year, the Biden administration issued an executive order to set standards and manage the risk of AI, including a standard to develop tools and tests to help ensure that AI systems are safe, secure, and trustworthy. However, there are no federal policies currently in place to regulate the use of AI in policing, end quote. We stand resolved that the Justice and Forensic Algorithm Act has been introduced to Congress to prohibit the use of trade secrets privileges to prevent defense access to evidence in criminal proceedings, provide for the establishment of computational forensic algorithm testing standards and a computation forensic algorithm testing program, and for other purposes. Our first contention is the harms associated with AI and predictive policing. Subpoint A is that the Justice and Forensic Algorithm Act has failed to pass through Congress. This is the inherency of our affirmative. According to Clayton Vickers, a reporter for The Hill, wrote in 2024, quote, for the past 3 Congress's Representative Takano, joined twice by Representative Evans, has introduced legislation that addresses issues of testing and transparency in criminal justice, so far failing to garner enough traction to pass the bill. Nobody had really addressed this particular issue of black box technologies that are being marketed to prosecutors, police, and law enforcement folks on the basis of their alleged efficacy. Every American wants to feel that they can get a fair trial if they're being accused of something wrong. That's one of the hallmarks of being an American. But what do you do when the witness and evidence brought against you is a machine protected as a trade secret? How do you contend with that? The term artificial intelligence refers to the broad discipline of making machines that learn from experience and mimic human-like intelligence in making predictions. Unlike other forensic technology law enforcement uses, AI is responsive to its environment and sensitive to its users, meaning it can produce different outcomes throughout its life cycle. Without testing and transparency, these nuances are lost and the likelihood of error isn't accounted for. Currently, public officials are essentially taking private firms at their word that their technologies are as robust or nuanced as advertised, despite expanding research exposing the potential pitfalls of this approach. End quote. AI and predictive policing can raise concerns related to the Fourth Amendment, which protects individuals from unreasonable searches and seizures and ensures that law enforcement authorities must have probable cause and a warrant to conduct searches and arrests. Predictive policing algorithms often use large data sets like crime history, arrests, and other surveillance data to predict where crimes might occur or who might commit them. These algorithms do not always rely on specific individualized probable cause, which is a constitutional requirement before law enforcement can take actions like searching a home or making an arrest. Predictive policing can lead to targeted surveillance of individuals based solely on statistical patterns rather than concrete evidence of wrongdoing. According to Vickers cited above, quote, AI is playing an expanding and often invisible role in America's legal system. There's often no way for defendants to challenge their digital accuser or even know what role it played in the case. Under current law in most jurisdictions, prosecutors don't have to disclose artificial intelligence use to the judge or defense counsel, end quote. Subpoint B is that using AI and predictive policing perpetuates racial bias. According to the NAACP issue brief released in 2024, quote, predictive policing in AI is when software uses data and algorithms to forecast criminal activity. In reality, there is growing evidence that AI-driven predictive policing perpetuates racial bias, violates privacy rights, and undermines public trust in law enforcement, end quote. Subpoint B, we must avoid the replication of racial and economic impacts when incorporating new technologies into policing, says Dr. Kiana Likademi, professor of the University of Florida Department of Computer and Information Science and Engineering, 2022. Quote, a growing course of academics have warned that predictive policing algorithms are susceptible to influence from fallible human decision-making, which can have enormous social consequences. For example, communities with higher police presence will naturally have higher arrest rates. This leads to the creation of data sets that appear to reflect higher crime rates, but which really reflect greater police attention. This can be to the disadvantage of the communities already burdened by the possible overpolicing. When historical racism and class discrimination are encoded in the outputs of an algorithm, minority and low-income communities might fall victim to feedback loop of even greater police presence. It is vital to ensure that racial and economically disparate impacts are not perpetuated in new and emerging technologies in this field. Remarks about the expectations for predictive policing emphasize how important it is that the public is able to know, assess, and reject such systems. If residents are unsatisfied with the results of assessments, if they feel like their civil rights are being encroached upon, or if they feel unsafe or threatened by this technology, it is critical that police as public servants always consider adopting alternatives to the technology. The growing prominence of predictive policing has led to increased interest for researchers and lawmakers. However, research access to active predictive policing systems is limited due to the proprietary nature. Lack of access to code has a ripple effect. Evaluations of criminology software must first simulate the algorithms before they can evaluate them. Researchers designing fairness metrics have extremely limited sources for data to rely on to judge the effectiveness of the tools they design. And ethicists and legal scholars who want to address the moral and legal ramifications of predictive policing have difficulty finding clear information on the capabilities and implementation of criminology software. This makes evaluations of predictive policing as it is used by police one of the most critical areas of need in the machine learning fairness. Conducting evaluations is complicated by the lack of clear standards for fairness techniques, which can and do conflict, as well as intellectual property protections of the source code. Ultimately, ML as a field must critically engage with policing itself, end quote. We must evaluate the social impacts of ML-based predictive policing before allowing any form of AI-driven predictive policing to be used. Now more than ever, it is critical that predictive policing be developed and implemented in ways that are sensitive to its social impacts. One may also question whether ML and AI should be used in socially sensitive areas such as policing due to the negative consequences that can arise from inaccuracy or bias. For instance, being arrested, even if charges are dropped, can cause an individual to lose their job, be evicted, and struggle with background checks throughout their life. Moreover, police encounters can be life-threatening, particularly for Black and Indigenous individuals. This is what we must acknowledge as we see predictive policing and other criminology data tools proliferate, recidivism prediction and police facial recognition being among them. Quote, as of 2016, approximately 1 in 4 departments had access to police facial recognition systems. Not only can skewed data lead to police over-patrolling in poor and minority neighborhoods, but any corruption in police departments can also lead to predictive policing being used as a tool of abuse. Therefore, current policing systems should be evaluated for their potential to address and overcome systemic racism, discrimination, and prejudice within policing alongside of their potential to automate the processes of law enforcement. Technology is only as objective and fair as the practice it is being used to automate, end quote, Alikademi, 2022. Thus, we offer the following plan. The United States federal government should adopt the Justice and Forensic Algorithm Act. Contention 2, the Justice and Forensic Algorithm Act solves. Subpoint A. A minimum federal standard is necessary due to the nebulous nature of data. Without violating the precepts of federalism, the federal government is obliged to produce the basic infrastructure as a framework to act as a support resource source for states who may not be in a position to construct best practices individually. Because AI has evolved at a far more rapid rate than it can be regulated, the onus is on the federal government to create a policy governing the elements of AI predictive policing that infringe upon and violate pre-existing constitutional protections for American citizens. According to Michael Rinaldi, 2024, who is an attorney and former police officer, consultant, and instructor on police legal issues to the New York State Division of Criminal Justice Services, and has taught officers around New York State for the last 19 years in that capacity. Quote, now is the key time to institute control measures on the use of AI in policing. AI represents a rapidly evolving area where we must initiate control measures and apply a continuous improvement mindset. If we do this voluntarily, we will build stronger organizations and a stronger profession, and that is our best chance for a more favorable view in the eyes of the media and the public, end quote. Our affirmative plan is not only good in principle and across political contexts, it's particularly necessary to adopt today to rein in potential policing and privacy abuses by the Trump administration with badly needed legislative oversight.
Thank you, Kristen. Now conducting a cross-examination of Kristen, on behalf of Suffolk is Will Woodring, and Will is a two-time regional champion and 2024 JV national champion from Medway, Massachusetts.
So actually, I think he's gonna be doing, Anthony's gonna be doing the cross-examination.
Anthony doing the cross. Okay. Sorry about that. So I have Anthony Gagne who's doing the cross-examination, who is an ACE researcher from Seabrook, New Hampshire.
Hello. Okay, so the first question for your team is, what was the content contained within the Justice Forensic Algorithm Act?
All right. So the Justice and Forensic Algorithm Act aims to ensure transparency in the use of algorithms in criminal justice by requiring defendants access to the source code of algorithms used against them and establishing standards and testing programs for forensic algorithms.
Perfect, thank you. Do you know the statistic on how many people have been wrongfully convicted versus like correctly convicted using the predictive policing AI?
I do know that. I actually convicted nobody, but for us, I don't think that wrongfully convicted and wrongfully arrested are really, you know, compared to convicted, arrested is still bad enough. You know, people spend 17 months away from their children and their wives, and their life has changed forever.
Sure. Do you have the arrest statistic then?
8.
8, okay. Okay. So considering that AI and predictive policing are subject to bias coding, how can these algorithms be considered problem-free in the future, or how could they be problem-free?
That's actually the whole point of our contention is to, the Justice and Forensic Algorithm Act is going to make sure that it is not, you know, it isn't biased. That's the whole point of the act, is for us to be able to regulate it and test it.
Okay, perfect. And could you clarify what the ML coding is exactly?
Machine learning?
Yes, yes.
I do not know.
Okay, thank you. Would you say that AI and predictive policing have, so you are, as it stands, predictive policing has not worked effectively within the context of accuracy? Sorry. If so, studies have shown time and time again that it only reaffirms, as you said. If that is the case, why not entirely ban it? I think entirely banning it would solve all these issues.
Yeah, I understand what you're saying, but we're, you know, whether we want to enjoy it, embrace it or not, AI is here and it's not going anywhere with technology. And I just, like I said in my speech, it is coming at an incredible rate and it's our job to embrace it. And so That's why instead of banning it or keeping it the way it is, we're just asking that we can monitor it and make sure that it is doing the best for us as citizens, American citizens, instead of not regulating it and trusting what, you know, businesses are saying that it's going to do for us.
Perfect.
Thank you.
So moving right along, it is now time for the negative team's first constructive argument for 7 to 9 minutes. And delivering that first negative constructive is Jerry Gendel, who is a poli-sci grad student from Arlington, Mass.
Contention 1, AI restrictions fail. AI restrictions on predictive policing can be ineffective if they don't address the root causes of bias and discrimination within the data and algorithms themselves. While restrictions might limit the use of certain AI tools, they may not prevent other forms of predictive policing from emerging or simply redirect them to different, less transparent methods. The core issue is the perpetuation of biased data and algorithms, which can lead to unfair policing practices regardless of specific restrictions. Predictive policing fails for multiple reasons. Reason 1, predictive policing algorithms are trained on historical crime data, which often reflects existing biases in policing practices, such as racial profiling and over-policing of certain communities. These biases are then amplified by the algorithms, leading to skewed predictions and disproportionate targeting of certain groups. Predictive policing relies on biased data, ensures prejudice and racism are reported constantly, and there exists a lack of transparency that erodes public trust and makes regulations shaky. Many predictive policing algorithms are proprietary and lack transparency, making it difficult to understand how they work, what data they use, and how they make predictions. This lack of transparency makes it hard to identify and address bias, and it can erode public trust in policing. Gargalia 2020 says one of the biggest flaws of predictive policing is the faulty data fed into the system. Algorithms depend on data informing them of where criminal activity has happened to predict where future criminal activity will take place. However, predictive policing only accounts for crimes that are reported. This creates a feedback loop that makes predictive policing a self-fulfilling prophecy. This feedback loop will impact vulnerable communities, including communities of color, unhoused communities, and immigrants. It will deploy more officers to the communities that are already over-policed. A recent deep dive into the predictive program used by the Pasco County Sheriff's Office illustrates the harms. After one 15-year-old was arrested for stealing bicycles out of a garage, the algorithm continuously dispatched police to harass him and his family. Over the span of 5 months, police went to his home 21 times. They showed up at his gym and his parents' place of work. These visits often resulted in other unrelated arrests that further victimized families and added to the likelihood that they would be visited and harassed again. In one incident, the mother of a targeted teenager was issued a $2,500 fine when police sent to check in on her child saw chickens in the backyard. In another incident, a father was arrested when the police looked through the window of a house and saw a 17-year-old smoking a cigarette. These algorithms often draw from flawed and non-transparent sources, such as gang databases, which have been the subject of public scrutiny due to the lack of transparency and over-inclusion of Black and Latinx people. In LA, for instance, if police notice a person wearing a sports jersey or having a brief conversation with someone on the street, it may be enough to include that person in the LAPD's gang database. To test racial disparities in predictive policing, Human Rights Data Analysis Group, HRDAG, looked at Oakland Police Department's reduced drug crimes. Sure enough, HRDAG found that the data-driven model would have focused almost exclusively on low-income communities of color. In addition, there is a disturbing lack of transparency surrounding many predictive policing tools. When data-driven policing tools are black boxes, it is difficult to assess the risk error of rates, false positive, limits in programming capabilities, biased data, or even flaws in source code that affect search results. 2, it creates a feedback loop where faulty data is fed into AI. The affirmative only risks reaffirming violence in the status quo. The use of predictive policing can create a feedback loop where the algorithm's predictions reinforce existing biases. For example, if an algorithm predicts that a certain area is likely to have crime, police might over-police that area, leading to more arrests and further reinforcing the algorithm's prediction. DHD 2025 says, consider the accounts of police violence at the 2020 Queer Liberation March for Black Lives and Against Police Brutality in New York, or at Pride events the following year. The software does not take any acts of aggression by the police into account, nor does it account for the disproportionate dispatch of police to an area due to conditions associated with poverty. This software also fails to account for other forms of crime being perpetuated in neighborhoods, such as white-collar crime and rent manipulations that force people out of their homes. 3, AI is also inherently limited in its capabilities. This means data biases will always be an issue. While restrictions on AI tools might seem like a solution, they may not address the underlying problems of biased data and algorithms. For example, if AI tools are restricted, police might return to other methods, such as human analysis of data or using less transparent models, which could have similar or even more harmful effects. WISE 2025, bias is also a key concern when it comes to AI and the recommendations it makes. Critics have pointed out to the fact that AI suffers from the worst of both worlds when it comes to its ability to reason. It lacks the human ability to take things on a case-by-case basis, yet it's still susceptible to the biases of the data scientists who coded it. Big data increases inequality and threatens democracy is a fundamental problem for AI. The recommendations it makes are based on data that has been fed, and every racially biased conviction lie in those data and are repeated with each risk calculation that it makes. Given that minority groups face higher rates of prosecution, it is possible that predictive algorithms are using race as a proxy for criminality, creating an even more vicious cycle of policing. So, contention 2, ban AI counter plan. AI fails. AI and predictive policing simply does not work. Here's another example of how it's just hilariously bad. Alcibi 2023. Who could have seen this coming? As a joint investigation by the Markup and Wired shows, it seems to have failed miserably. Geolytica, a predictive policing software used by police in Plainfield, New Jersey, was so bad at predicting crimes that its success rate was less than 0.5%. These prediction models are riddled with ethical concerns, given the discriminatory and racist natures of both artificial intelligence and law enforcement. They are shockingly ineffective at predicting crime. While the algorithm was slightly better at predicting some crimes than others, it correctly identified 0.6% of robberies or aggravated assaults, versus the 0.1% of burglaries it got right. This result still paints a damning picture of the tool's effectiveness. Geolytica was so bad at predicting crime, in fact, that the head of Plainfield Police Department actually admitted that it was rarely used. Thus, Suffolk University proposes the following counterplan. The United States federal government should prohibit the use of artificial intelligence in the area of predictive policing. This plan is competitive. Any permutation would be a severance because the affirmative bans a restriction, which means they see value in AI. They just want a restriction. Any permutation that results in a ban means the affirmative team would sever out of their partial affirmation of AI. A ban is not a restriction. As such, you ought to reject any permutation. We agree regarding the harms of AI and the harms of the criminal justice system. However, your plan does not solve this resolution. Thank you.
You're in, love a good counter plan. So now, for 1 to 3 minutes, the affirmatives cross-examiner will be coming up, Hillary Goding. And Hillary is from Lincoln, Maine, and is earning a degree in human services, and this is her 3rd MPDL degree.
So, why do you think removing all AI in policing is the right decision? How is this possible with it already implemented nationwide and worldwide, actually?
Things can be banned even if they exist. Like, that's not an issue here, saying that it's already here, so we might as well use it. We've listed together, even your affirmative has listed the negative effects of AI, how it's done racial profiling and contributed to biases and also the criminal justice system. And by reforming it, you're not actually going to solve any of these issues that's part of the resolution. By banning it, we're just taking it out of the equation completely. It's no longer going to serve an issue, and all the harms that are part of the resolution are going to be solved.
And how will you justify the loss of removing it to taxpayers who have funded this with billions of tax dollars that could have funded other crime prevention?
Would they rather spend their money constantly over policing neighborhoods that this data keeps putting into? I think if you look at the cost effective analysis of this, you're going to see that down the line, putting way more money and effort into these policies that are creating over policing and mass incarceration, you're going to see this become a large issue. Whereas if we just eliminate the program and cut our losses, we're going to be better off.
Okay, and why is it better to ban AI instead of regulating AI? Do you think this will stop other nations from suppressing the US in safety and crime reduction?
You get the first part of that again?
Okay, why is it better to ban AI instead of regulating it?
Simple. Again, this solves the resolution, right? So your app is claiming that just by regulating it, it's going to magically get rid of all the
But
harm
the
that we
second
agree
part
on.
of my
And the
question.
second part is, this is the United States. I'm not regarding the other parts of the world about talking about our own international criminality system. The resolution is focused specifically on the United States.
Okay, and what evidence do you have that banning AI is preferable instead of using the algorithms?
Well, it's simple. We're criticizing the algorithms themselves, talking about how they contribute to the biases and over policing. So that itself is data according to.
Okay, and how do you justify the billions of dollars already spent on research for creation of this technology if we just scrap it? and
This has been
record
asked and
it?
answered. It's just going to be a cost-effective analysis here.
Okay.
I mean, sunk cost fallacy is a fallacy for a reason.
And what about eliminating the use of historical data in predictive policing? Doesn't this eliminate your argument and therefore make regulation effective?
No, because as I mentioned before, AI it comes to the two different faults of being itself, right? It's the human biases, but also it's just being so limited to its knowledge and not being able to make a case by case study on this. If you have actual people doing this, yes, you'll still keep the biases, but you can actually also keep human ingenuity in it and not have it be done by a cold machine that doesn't know the difference between things.
Okay, and last question. So you're suggesting that no regulation on AI that is already in use nationwide because that's a fact better than some regulation?
We both agreed on multiple problems with this. So if there is regulation that's working and you're trying to make an app for that, again, I'm actually proving what the resolution is going to be by banning it.
Thank you.
Now moving on, we have the negative team's first rebuttal argument for 6 minutes. And that will be delivered by Juliet Ludka. And Juliet is a sophomore politics, philosophy, and econ major. And she was the 7th speaker at the 2024 Novice Nationals Tournament.
Begin with a brief overview. AI restrictions in predictive policing are often ineffective if they don't address the biased data and algorithms at their core. Limiting certain tools may simply shift practices to less transparent methods, allowing unfair policing to persist. Our first contention is that AI restrictions fail. Our Guerrilla 2020 evidence demonstrates that predictive policing fails for several reasons. It relies on biased historical data, which amplifies racial profiling and over-policing. It reproduces systemic prejudice, and its lack of transparency due to propriety and opaque algorithms undermine public trust and hampers accountability. Algorithms are based on historically biased data. This point was conceded by the affirmative team during cross-sex, meaning that the regulation that the affirmative is suggesting doesn't provide a significant departure from the status quo. What's the point of making the source code and data available if we already know that it's unreliable and biased? Why put up another bureaucratic barrier if it won't assist those who have already been victimized by its use and the use of these fundamentally flawed systems? The affirmative simply does not do enough. You can also cross-apply this to our second contention. You can extend our DHG 2025 card, which outlines how predictive policing creates a feedback loop where biased data leads to over-policing. This generates more arrests and reinforces the algorithm's flawed predictions to uphold systemic biases. And you can extend our WISE 2025 card. AI's inherent limits mean that data biases remain a constant issue. Restricting AI tools won't solve this, as policing may shift to equally biased or less transparent methods with similar harms. This brings us to contention 2, which is our banning AI counterplan. Our Al Sabai 2023 card gives a direct account of the failures of predictive policing software. In Plainfield, New Jersey, it was largely ineffective and predicted less than 0.5% of crimes out of over 23,000 predictions. While it promised to forecast crime like a real Minority Report, the software instead reflected the deeply flawed, biased nature of both AI and policing. Even the Plainfield police admitted that it was rarely used, and they ultimately abandoned it. So you can extend our counter plan text. The United States federal government should prohibit the use of artificial intelligence in the area of predictive policing. During cross-ex, the affirmative team remarked that AI wasn't going anywhere, so we might as well embrace it. But why would we embrace such a systematically harmful system that has only perpetuated racial bias? Going over again any answer to the perms, again, the plan is competitive. It offers a sustainable net benefit and is competitive because the affirmative supports AI with restrictions, not a full ban. This means, again, any permutation that results in a ban would sever their original positioning and force them to abandon their partial endorsement of AI. A ban goes beyond a restriction. It's fundamentally different, so you can reject any firms. Now to quickly go over any potential answers they might have. If they attempt to respond saying that this is a first step, restrictions without reform are performative. First, restrictions that fail to address biased data only repackage the problem. They can create a veneer of reform while the same discriminatory practices persist through new channels. And second, police departments can comply with restrictions on one tool while switching to equally flawed or less transparent methods. This is just a regulatory whack-a-mole, not meaningful reform. And next, if they try to argue that this is a gradual fix, gradualism only works when each step actually addresses the problem. These restrictions don't. They reinforce systemic biases by legitimizing flawed tools and software. And on the same vein, incremental change is only useful if it's moving in the right direction. If we accept broken tools under the same banner of progress, then we risk locking in injustice for even longer. And there are two strong impacts to both of these arguments. First, accepting weak reforms normalizes discriminatory policing under a high-tech guise. And real change will get deferred indefinitely under the illusion that something is getting done. Substantial level fixes will only stall deeper reforms by creating a political cover for the continued abuse. And that delays real accountability and enables ongoing harm to over-policed communities. Lastly, if they attempt to argue that no restrictions are worse, again, our second contention is literally a counterplan that involves fully banning the use of AI and predictive policing. In the world of the negative, we wouldn't be left with no restrictions, it's a full ban. And second, the choice isn't between weak restrictions and nothing at all. It's between flawed regulation and a real system overhaul. The impact of this is that a full ban would cut the root of the problem instead of just trimming its branches. That avoids normalizing these flawed practices. And lastly, the data and the tool are inseparable. If the data is flawed, any tool built on it will be flawed as well. Restrictions applied without fixing the input data will only cement the bias into the system, making reform harder down the line, which means that this decks any of their gradualism arguments. Ultimately, this would allow biases to persist under the false belief that tech can be fixed without structural change. And I'm not sure how much time I have remaining, but in my last second, I'd like to address something that we went over briefly in cross-ex, and that is the idea of US investment in AI under the status quo. The affirmative is right in saying that the age of AI is here. It's been made pretty abundantly clear with the increase in funding over the past few years. But that being said, banning the use of AI in predictive policing won't necessarily impact our national investment into AI generally. It's likely still going to be a very large industry with a lot of potentially good outcomes. However, it's been demonstrated through the evidence that in predictive policing, this is simply not the case. And it's for all these reasons that I urge you to vote negative and for the ban of the use of AI in predictive policing. Thank you.
Now we will hear from the affirmative team's first rebuttal argument. For 4 to 6 minutes, we have Jessica Sinclair. Jessica is an English lit major who comes armed with sharp arguments and an even sharper sense of humor, and who is ready to turn this debate into a lively showdown with less drama and more mic drops.
Our opponents are proposing that we ban AI altogether. We say that's not possible and completely unrealistic. firm. In an article written Eza, Widgery, and Canada called Artificial Intelligence and Law Enforcement, the Federal and State Landscape 2025 say law enforcement agencies at state, local, and federal level already have entrenched AI and practices. Come on, folks, we cannot put a genie back in the bottle here. There are 18,000 state and local law enforcement agencies across the country, and the vast majority of them are considered local. At the federal level, there are 90 agencies that employ 136,815 full-time officers, while federal agencies sometimes differ greatly in scope and function from state and local agencies. The primary function of more than 2/3 of federal officers is in criminal investigations. As law enforcement agencies move to adopt AI, lawmakers at all levels of government have considered policies that balance the benefits of AI in policing with potential risks. No state or locality has adopted a comprehensive set of laws governing law enforcement use in AI. In states that have legislated, the approach has been either limit the adoption of AI or address how very specific applications of technology can be used. Using unregulated AI in predictive policing jeopardizes civil liberties. In turn, an article written by Dominique Winter of the American Bar Association in Criminal Justice Magazine called Inhuman Reason, Predictive Policing Algorithms Are the Fourth Amendment 2025 states. The Fourth Amendment may help limit AI's expansion into unconstitutional searches, as courts often use it to enforce judicial caution with new technologies. Legal precedent emphasizes that technological advancements cannot override constitutional protections. The Supreme Court has repeatedly affirmed that, quote, the progress of science cannot be allowed to erode Fourth Amendment protections. Quote, Carpenter versus United States 585, citing Olmstead versus United States. Also stated in this article is unregulated AI and law enforcement risk double counting, where officers unknowingly weigh the same factor twice, once in their own analysis and then again in AI's recommendation. This can lead officers to believe that they have reasonable suspicion to search, increasing the likelihood of unconstitutional searches. Our opponents say, why should we pass the Justice and Forensic Algorithm Act? How many times has the bill been passed on already? We say pass this act ASAP, and this is why. As evidence in an article written by Richardson, Schultz, and Crawford at New York University Law Review titled Dirty Data, Bad Predictions, How Civil Rights Violations Impact Police Data, Predictive Policing Systems, and Justice, 2019, the article criticizes predictive policing algorithms for relying on biased police data, often rooted in past civil rights violations, which leads to disproportionately targeting marginalized communities. It warns that unregulated AI trained on flawed and unlawful practices will not only replicate, but also amplify these biases, exacerbating existing inequalities in law enforcement. To counteract these harms, the authors advocate for legislative measures like the Justice and Forensic Algorithm Act, which would enforce transparency, accountability, and fairness in AI-driven policing, ultimately promoting a more equitable justice system. When predictive policing uses unregulated AI, it eliminates human bias. We think not. Transparency, accountability, and trust are essential. An article written by Casey Baker of People magazine titled Law Enforcement is Experimenting with AI-Assisted Policing, What You Need to Know, September 24. AI tools like Axon's Draft 1 may improve administrative efficiency in law enforcement, but cases like Michael Williams' wrongful incarceration due to ShotSpotter highlight the dangers of over-reliance on flawed technology. Experts stress that AI should enhance, not replace human judgment, as errors in unregulated AI-driven policing can lead to life-altering consequences. The push for the Justice and Forensic Algorithm Act is crucial to ensuring strict regulations that address bias, accountability, and public trust in AI's role in law enforcement. The idea that our opponents have about AI and predictive policing being major help in crime dropping, that is so far from the truth. An article by the NAACP titled Artificial Intelligence and Predictive Policing Issue Brief 2024 noted that unregulated predictive policing tools have been adopted by cities across the US, but evidence shows these technologies can fail to reduce crime. A letter by the US senators to the Department of Justice highlights that these biased algorithms increase surveillance, stops, and arrests, disproportionately affecting Black communities. As a result, the harmful impact of algorithmic predictions only intensifies using racial disparities in law enforcement. Another article written by William Douglas Heaven of Massachusetts Institute of Technology Review Daily AI titled Predictive Policing Under-Delivers on Its Goals and Risks Discrimination, October 2023, announced that an investigation by the Markup and Wired by Geologica, a predictive policing software used in Plainfield, New Jersey, had a success rate of less than 0.5%, leading to the police department to discontinue its use. To find the findings add to growing evidence questioning the effectiveness of AI-driven policing and its potential to worsen inequalities in the criminal justice system. Another article written by Justin Wilson, Vice President of Communications in the Institute for Injustice titled Case Closed, Pasco Sheriffs Admits Predictive Policing program violates Constitution, December 2024, stated, the Pasco Sheriff Office acknowledged that its controversial predictive policing tool program violated constitutional rights, including the First, Fourth, and 14th Amendment. The program led to frequent, often baseless visits and citations that harassed residents without cause. As part of this legal settlement, the department agreed to implement policy changes and provide six-figure financial compensation to those affected. Predictive policing through AI must be strictly regulated because without oversight, it leads to biased outcomes, violates privacy, and erodes public trust, which is already fragile. Unregulated AI often deepens skepticism and fear, making communities less likely to cooperate with authorities. Guardrails are necessary to establish ethical guidelines to prevent misuse and hold law enforcement accountable. The plan imposed by our opponents doesn't make any sense banning AI because their plan is already happening, and guess what? It's not working. Civil liberties and wrongful arrests are happening, and the Justice and Forensic Algorithm Act will clearly show us how these algorithms work and how we can defend ourselves against them.
Now, for 6 to 8 minutes, delivering the negative team's second constructive argument, we have Asher Israel, who is a philosophy major from Tennessee.
Contention 1, the affirmative is wrong. AI is not the root problem, predictive policing is. Suffolk will argue that the judges ought to reject predictive policing altogether. The app only risks making predictive policing seem like a viable and palatable option. This only replicates the very impacts they say need fixing in the status quo. Predictive policing is the new iteration of racial capitalism, organizing populations by digital epidermalization, the coding of bodies as data subject to violence of white normativity. They can win uniqueness claims about racial violence being the root cause, but biometric technologies change everything to maintain logistics in the smart city. Scandal 18. CompStat organizes heterotopic liveliness that undergirds the stack. Personal infrastructure diagrams racialize value and metric precision from racial capitalism. Metric production is central between captive and liberated subject positions. Hieroglyphics hide cultural seeing by skin color. Digital epidermalization of biometric technologies organize the computational means through which the body are coded as data to perform racialization into a new subject position that is ontologically unstable and subject to violence produced by white normativity. CompStat's epidermalization to racializing assemblage in which search and destroy is fed into the social field as ontologically destabilizing violence and governmentality. Digitalizing infrastructures do the work of digital epidermalization with recourse to blackened population. Digitalization is conditioned by the political economy. The smart city streets lead back to a digitizing carceral state. Enfleshment under racial capitalism is debilitation. It weaponizes surveillance systems and organic complex technical infrastructures. Cops don't need tech to produce racial difference because race is already datification. The product is the reproduction of already existing structures in new iterations of digital epidermalization to maintain racial and sexual difference while reconfiguring corporeality for and as capital in new techno-shock arrangements. The digital facilitates new capital. The question is, does digital technology need to change so everything can stay the same? The smart city is mutative institutions of inhumanist biopolitics that assign the value of extractable life, the liveliness of extractable value. This logistics in the whole blur a consolidating technosocial iteration of the cloud. Public partnerships between private tech companies and policing agencies are propelling a shadow industry for predictive policing technology across the US. Public pressure from summer protests is failing to hold tech firms to account. Quet 20. Protests against policing brought scrutiny onto big tech. Microsoft is knee-deep in fostering an ecosystem that provides police with software using Microsoft's cloud. The tech sector is increasingly entangled. Microsoft's links have been obscured by focus on facial recognition software. This misdirects attention from the DAS, later expanded to Atlanta, Brazil, and Singapore. It also obscures scores of vendors who run products on a government cloud, a shadow industry which provides mass surveillance to law enforcement. Microsoft banned sales of its own facial recognition, directing either away from Microsoft's contributions to police surveillance. Policing is done with active cooperation from tech companies. Predictive policing are the modernization of broken windows style policing, which cracked down on groups otherized by racial capitalism in order to clean up the city, Scannell 18. It operates as a logical rule, an aesthetic reworking of broken windows policing as mathematical computation. Broken windows theory is aesthetic repurposing of Jim Crow and militarized heteropatriarchy. Broken windows transformed racial logics of Black codes and liberalism and sexual politics into decisions about what the city should look like. It was deployed as a state practice of violently depopulating sexually plural spaces to pave the way for white heteronormative, transnational, and non-local bodies. This decision should be enforced by occupation performed by the seventh biggest army in the world, NYPD. This is articulated as a logic of caring and protecting communities from enacting any sort of resistance to a neoliberal racial capitalism. Broken Windows says a proper city simply doesn't have people relaxing on street corners. They should be at work, at home, at school, at a restaurant, shopping. Queer temporality cannot exist. The state makes such lived geographies the target, rationale, and end of its war machine. New York has invested heavily in surveillance apparatus of control. By rendering the city itself a surveillance system, thorough sensors, metadata, security cameras close the circle on the aesthetic logic of cleanliness that Broken Windows mobilizes. The city morphs into an urban laboratory, generating data to be analyzed. The state transforms into protecting non-white, non-heteronormative populations from themselves. The comment traces a shift from the heavy-handed power of the state to care to the lighter touch of predictive policing and surveillance. The algorithms diffracts the surveillance gaze of homonormative racial capitalist state into the queer times and places, bundling emergent possibilities, capital circulation, and unpredictability into monetizable modular capacity. Public faith in the effectiveness of predictive policing algorithms fundamentally changes the way that municipalities calculate risk. Rather than present true risk to public safety, algorithms map a sociality without us, where the unique details of life are transformed into the background data against which risk is determined. In this security paradigm, we trust the algorithm to determine the difference between an irradiated cancer patient and a terrorist dirty bomb, and sanitize police violence. Scannell 18. Complaining big data doesn't process the world is to make the assumption that big data is for the human. These systems fail to recognize the human. Sociality without us, NYC's AWARE has radiation sensors that are sensitive enough to pick up chemo in a passing body. It is not interesting whether the spike is from a dirty bomb or a human. The object trigger is a set of qualities against background surveillance. These spikes are what circulates as derivative capital, generating lively data, providing labor for capital, and the smooth circulation of value. It is an incarceration of liveliness that recruits non-conscious actants into the production of security. Cancerous cells are doing the labor of the carceral state, conjoining a body to form the background of a city against which the likelihood of a terrorist attack can be measured. The relationship between radiation metadata and social eruption becomes the logic by which politics organizes. Governance becomes the desire to smooth out the distinction between the digital and the analog. Technological systems are making themselves intelligible outside of the ontological world of the human mediator. They're producing a world in which the human body is disassembled and reformatted as digital possibilities. Politics becomes a practice of imagining, policing, and monetizing the curve. The DAS imagines space where crime is going to happen and deploys an assemblage of forces, police cars, uniforms, tasers, bodies, cameras, in order to destabilize this relation. It is prehensive, a logic of governance, scrambling productive forces into destabilized relations rather than organizing them. All returns us to Microsoft and the city's 30% cut of the profits. The city's capacity to operate is dependent on the production of disembedded populations, subjection to policing and arrest. The racial, class, sex, and gender differences that articulate a body outside neoliberal ideology of the state circle back as raw material for algorithmic analytic systems. These systems produce monetizable paths to criminal activity, towards incarceration. Security only makes sense in the authorization of the algorithm as a powerful arbiter of truth and futurity. Thank you.
Now, the affirmative team, second constructive argument for 6 to 8 minutes. We have Audrey and Nickerson. Audrey is from Montana. This is her second debate in MBTO. And to her, debate means that she's constantly learning and challenging herself and engaging with others who are committed to thoughtful discourse. Audrey is also very thankful to her family who are here to support her and to her team.
AI has the potential to significantly transform various sectors, but its use in predictive policing brings up serious ethical and practical concerns, such as bias in data, over-policing, lack of transparency, false positives, erosion of public trust, accountability issues, and potential for self-fulfilling prophecy. When law enforcement relies on biased algorithms and overlooks the social issues that contribute to criminal activity, it can worsen existing inequality and damage public confidence in police. Increasing public confidence in AI-powered policing can have serious repercussions. One major concern is that it could lead to a growing distrust and resistance toward law enforcement. When communities pull back from cooperation, it becomes harder for police to do their jobs effectively, especially in marginalized and underrepresented neighborhoods, where there's already a lot of skepticism about biased policing. If people begin to see AI and law enforcement as unfair or discriminatory, it really chips away the legitimacy of police actions. This can make it tough for officers to gain the trust and cooperation they need from communities. An issue brief released by the NAACP in 2024 discusses some of these concerns. Quote, the data used to make decisions around predictive policing comes from compiling and analyzing historical criminal data and police activity. Relying on historical criminal data to make police decisions is inherently biased, as data shows that the Black community is disproportionately negatively impacted in the criminal justice system due to targeted over-policing and discriminatory criminal laws, end quote. We can address these issues through data auditing and bias mitigation strategies. For instance, we should regularly review the data used to train algorithms to spot and correct potential biases. It's also essential to promote transparency and involve the public by engaging community members in discussions about how predictive policing algorithms are implemented. Establishing independent oversight through review boards can help monitor the use of these tools and investigate any potential abuses. We need to develop clearer guidelines that dictate when and how predictive policing should be utilized, ensuring we only rely on algorithmic predictions under appropriate circumstances. Ultimately, the lack of transparency and explainability in AI role in predictive policing poses a significant challenge that must be addressed. Mike Thomas, as mentioned earlier, discussed this in an article titled 14 Risks and Dangers of Artificial Intelligence. Quote, AI and deep learning models can be difficult to understand, even for those who work directly with the technology. This leads to a lack of transparency for how and why AI comes to its conclusions, creating a lack of explanation for what data AI algorithms use or why they make biased or unsafe decisions. There's still a long way before transparent AI systems become common practice. To make matters worse, AI companies continue to remain tight-lipped about their products. Secrecy leaves the general public unaware of possible threats and makes it difficult for lawmakers to take proactive measures, ensuring AI is developed responsibly. End quote. While AI can assist in identifying areas of higher crime rates, it is not a comprehensive solution. Overdependence on AI tools leads to a decline in proactive community policing methods, which have been proven effective in decreasing crime rate. The effectiveness of AI algorithms hinges on the quality of the data used to train them. If this data reflects societal biases, whether related to race, class, or geography, the AI will likely perpetuate those biases in its predictions and recommendations. Additionally, human biases influence the design and implementation of AI systems due to outcomes. Therefore, it is crucial to establish robust mechanisms designed to identify and reduce these biases. There are too many limitations in current predictive analytics and algorithms. We must err on the side of caution until we can solve for explainability, accountability, and transparency. Dr. Likademi, a professor in the Department of Computer and Information Science and Engineering at the University of Florida, noted in the piece titled "A Review of Predictive Policing from the Perspective of Fairness" that, quote, algorithms are imperfect tools. The main limitations of predictive analytics and algorithms are: 1, the use of probabilistic estimates on humans; 2, a singular focus on recognizing the patterns instead of understanding the underlying cause of the patterns; and 3, the lack of apprehension and judgment. Unfairness and discrimination caused by these algorithms could be rooted in the algorithm's inability to diagnose underlying causes or to exercise judgment. These deficiencies exacerbate unfairness and discrimination, end quote. Unregulated use of AI would exacerbate already unfair policing in minority communities. It can help to justify wrongful arrests and to proportionately target low-income communities. We have to think about the historical data that these systems are trained on. We have a good reason to think that this data reflects the biases of past police behavior. While the law is supposed to treat us all equally, we know that it is not always enforced equally, and that minorities can be scrutinized or punished more severely than whites. We know that blacks are arrested more than whites for crimes like drug possession, even though we know that blacks and whites use drugs at basically the same rate. If you feed skewed arrest data like this into an AI system, it's going to learn that blacks tend to be more dangerous, which is not true. The predictions generated would recommend that officers spend disproportionate time policing minority neighborhoods, where they're liable to encounter people committing crimes, generating more disproportionate arrest data, and so on. This creates a harmful feedback loop. The result is that police presence in these areas is ratcheted up or increased more and more until the effects are disproportionately concentrated in minority communities. Ultimately, we must proceed with caution when incorporating AI into police activities. Christian Hammond, Northwestern University Bill and Kathy Osborne Professor of Computer Science, Director of the Center for Advancing Safety, Machine Intelligence, and Director of the Master of Science in Artificial Intelligence Program, noted in an article published on September 9th, 2024, titled "The Complex Promise and Perils of AI in Policing," that quote, "The promise of AI in law enforcement is alluring. The ability to generate rapid and seemingly comprehensive incident reports is undoubtedly tempting for an evidence-based system. However, these systems are not without flaws, and we have a responsibility to ensure their deployment does not lead to greater injustices. The technology might save time, but it could also propagate errors and biases, speed and scale far behind human capability. The lesson here is clear. AI can be a powerful tool, but we must approach it with caution. We need to maintain a critical eye and ensure all aspects of its implementation are meticulously validated and checked for bias. Responsibility and thorough oversight are not optional. They are necessary conditions for the successful and just use of AI in policing." Unquote. The Justice and Forensic Algorithms Act would check against the negative unintended consequences of using AI in predictive policing. According to Laura Feener, a senior policy reporter at The Verge in 2024, the Justice and Forensic Algorithms Act would allow defendants to access the source code of software used to analyze evidence in their criminal proceedings. It would also require the National Institute of Standards and Technology to create testing standards for forensic algorithms. The bill would act as a check on unintended outcomes that could be created by using technology to help solve crimes. Human bias can be built into software, and facial recognition systems often struggle to differentiate Black faces. The use of algorithms to make consequential decisions in crime solving has raised alarms for consumers and advocates as a result of such research. Representative Takano pointed to the case of Oral Nick Hillary, who was accused of 2011 murder in New York. While traditional DNA analysis methods did not match Hillary to the crime, according to reports around the judicial proceedings, prosecutors had hoped to enter into evidence DNA analysis from a computer program called STR-Mix that could implicate him. A judge ruled in 2016 that those results could not be brought into trial. According to Chicano, that example demonstrates why the criminal justice system needs to be aware of both the possibilities and limitations of this technology. Defense attorneys and defendants themselves should be able to question the technology, and the technology should not be seen as infallible. While the industry may take issue with the bill's impact on the intellectual property, Chicano said he doesn't think proprietary profit-making rights supersede the due process rights of criminal defendants.
All right, and following that up, again, from the affirmative team, we'll hear from their second rebuttalist, who has 3 to 5 minutes. The affirmative's second rebuttalist is Ashley Bushy. Ashley has lived most of her life in Skowhegan, Maine. She has a career in construction management and has joined debate to further her public speaking skills.
Yeah, I'll take that. Just some folks. It's out of work. They argue to ban predictive policing. We respond with clear sightings of the pros of AI and predictive policing, as well as a clear map of the issues currently involved with the enactment of the Justice and Forensic Algorithm Act. Will allow for law enforcement to operate with a vital tool in this technological age that will be fair to all. As they have said, bias pre-exists AI. Without regulations, it actually eliminates the bias, creating compounded fairness. We must simply work out the bugs instead of just giving up. Putting is really the best option. We must move forward. In an article by Gregory Seville, 23, urban planner and criminologist, the pros and cons of using AI to prevent crime. There are many pros to using AI in predictive policing. Quote, pros, crime prediction is noted in predictive policing. The argument for public transparency. AI can analyze crime data to identify high-risk areas in order to optimize police patrols and resources. This data-driven approach can increase efficiency. Facial recognition. AI facial analysis can rapidly compare faces to databases of photos to identify suspects or missing persons. This expands investigation capabilities as examined in facial recognition software and crime prevention. Risk assessment. As discussed in how AI is transforming the criminal justice system. AI algorithms can assess recidivism, risk to inform bail and sentencing decisions. The goal is to improve identification of high and low risk offenders, end quote. An article by AI predictive police, an article by Beth Piasol, 2010, contributor to the National Institute of Justice Journal. AI and predictive policing can work with increased transparency and community involvement. Transparency and community involvement are important. Community trust is huge. We need to be extremely transparent as we advance this discussion of how law enforcement will use information and how we tie that information to officer deployment. All of these discussions must be open. The community must have confidence that law enforcement will handle information the right way, said Thomas O'Reilly, Senior Policy Advisor at the Justice Department's Bureau of Justice Assistance. As we move into predictive policing, nothing should be secret. We should engage privacy advocates and community leaders from the outset to explain the program and get their ideas and input to alleviate their concerns. An article by Academy 22. When it comes to implementing this technology, much needs to be done to ensure the product is being used correctly. It is critical that users understand that the system can and cannot do, and that they are properly trained to use the system as a supplement to their responsibilities. Officers are in many cases given little or no instruction about what to do when they arrive at a designated high-risk area. What is an officer to do in a 500 by 500 foot area, especially when there's no actionable intelligence? Recommendations: implement rigorous oversight, establish independent oversight bodies to review and monitor the use of AI and predictive policing, ensuring algorithms are fair and accurate and non-discriminatory. Mandate transparency and accountability. Require law enforcement agencies to disclose the use of predictive policing tools, including the data sources, methodologies, and impact assessments. Promote community engagement. Involve community members in the decision-making process regarding the use of AI and law enforcement to build trust and accountability. Ban the use of biased data. Prohibit the use of historical crime data and other sources known to contain racial biases in predictive policing algorithms. Establish legal framework. Enact legislation to regulate the development, deployment, and evaluation of AI and policing with strict penalties for violations of civil liberties. An article by Thomas 24, the lack of transparency and explainability are problematic for using AI and predictive policing. AI and deep learning models can be difficult to understand, even for those who work directly with the technology. This leads to a lack of transparency for how and why AI comes to its conclusions, creating a lack of explanation for what data algorithms use or why they make biased or unsafe decisions. There's still a long way before transparent AI systems become common practice. To make matters worse, AI companies continue to remain tight-lipped about their products. Secrecy leaves the general public unaware of possible threats and makes it difficult for lawmakers to take proactive measures ensuring AI is developed responsibly.
And now for the negative team to make a rebuttal argument. If I have the order right, I believe this Will Will is a two-time regional champion and 2024 JV national champion from Medway, Mass.
To start off, I want to reiterate our counter plan, which is to ban AI in the area of predictive policing. It is imperative that we ban AI in the use of predictive policing because that is the only way that we can possibly solve any of the problems that have been detailed by either side. At the end of the day, we are speaking about really the same problems that are going on in the criminal justice system, right? We agree with the harms that are being perpetuated. We agree that this is an incredibly harmful situation that we are currently in. But we've proven time and time again throughout every single speech that just putting regulations is not going to solve the problem. We need to ban the use altogether. That is the only way that we can solve this because it comes down to the data itself. The data that is being fed to AI is inherently flawed. It's inherently based on incorrect crime data, right? I mean, the data itself is based on, historic issues with the criminal justice system. So if we keep feeding this back into the AI system, it's never going to give us anything correct. The only way to do this is to completely ban the use of AI in predictive policing. We are not saying to ban AI altogether. We're not saying that nobody ever can use AI, right? We're not trying to, put limits on use of AI and other things. We're just saying in the area of predictive policing, it should not be used. They've said a couple times that we can't put the genie back in the bottle. But that's not true. They haven't detailed why that's the case. They've said some statistics about how many police officers there are, about how many, different criminal justice agencies there are in the US. But that doesn't mean you can't stop all of those officers from using a tool, especially when that tool has done so much harm to the people that it claims to be protecting. So at the end of the day, you absolutely can ban it, and banning is the only way to solve this. They say, for example, that transparency and regulation can coexist at the same time. But when one tool is restricted, it's more likely that departments will shift to a less transparent method, such as an internal or a third-party analysis that's no longer subject to public scrutiny. These restrictions rarely include public oversight or transparency measures, which only make it easier for departments to evade accountability. At the end of the day, again, the only way to do this is to ban it. Our plan, they said at one point earlier in the speech, they said that our plan is what's already in place. I heard that, I wrote that down, but that's not what's already happening, right? We are not arguing for the status quo. We are not saying to continue the status quo. We are saying that police would not be using AI in the area of predictive policing if you vote for the negative. I'm not sure if I heard a perm. I thought I might have heard a perm, but just in case, just to cover that ground. You can't perm with our counter plan because it's severance. The plan is competitive, and any permutations would be severance because the affirmative bans a restriction, which means that they see value in AI and they just want to restrict it. But any permutation results in the ban means the affirmative would sever out of their partial affirmation of AI. A ban is not a restriction, and as such, you ought to reject any sort of permutation. Excuse me, yeah. So going back, as we covered in our second constructive speech, AI is not the root problem, but predictive policing is. We've argued that the judges ought to reject predictive policing altogether. The AF only risks making predictive policing seem like a viable and palatable option. This only replicates the very impacts that they say needs fixing in the status quo. Extend, our evidence on that one. Skinnell 18, predictive policing is the new iteration of racial capitalism, organizing populations by digital epidermization. Extend further down on that, equate 2020 public partnerships between private tech companies and policing agencies, propelling a shadow industry of predictive policing technology across the US. Public pressure from summer protests is failing to hold tech firms accountable. Also extend Skinnell 18, predictive policing systems, the modernization of broken window style policing, which crack down on groups otherized by racial capitalism in order to clean up the city. These are harms that can only be solved by a complete ban on AI, which is why we ask you to vote for the negative. Thank you.
All right, we have now reached the point of the debate when we hear the closing arguments. So returning to the podium for the affirmative team for 30 to 90 seconds, delivering the closing argument is Hillary Godin.
Okay, throughout this debate, we have proven one undeniable fact. AI is not neutral. It is trained on biased data, used by biased systems, and disproportionately harms disadvantaged minority communities. This is not a future concern, it is happening right now. Our opponents may argue that AI should be banned altogether, but what about the harms police have caused shooting innocent people, especially minorities? Should we ban them too? That system is flawed, isn't it? We cannot afford to wait for perfect technology when people are being wrongfully arrested, denied jobs, and unfairly targeted today, and we cannot flush billions of dollars of research and implementation into our law enforcement departments by scrapping AI with bans. This is reckless, wasteful, and regressive. This is why we civil human beings created a legislative process. If we continue to trust corporations to self-regulate, we are giving them a free pass to profit from discrimination while marginalized communities suffer the consequences. The burden should not be on those harmed by AI to prove it is flawed. The burden should be on those developing and deploying AI to prove it is fair. This is not just a technology issue, it is a civil rights issue. AI must be regulated and held accountable now, not after another wrongful conviction, another denied opportunity, or another community harmed. We urge you to stand on the side of justice, fairness, maturity, and responsibility, because technology should serve.
And for 30 to 90 seconds, bringing us home with the negative team's closing argument, returning to the podium is Anthony Gotti.
Your decision is easy. We have proven that AI and predictive policing is harmful in ways that restriction can never properly be solved. Until problems inherent to predictive policing, namely bias coding, are fixed, AI will only reproduce racial violence and prejudice, which is the very thing everyone in this room agrees ought to be solved. We have presented numerous examples of both AI and predictive policing writ large failing and reproducing more harms. As such, you should feel comfortable voting on the Ban AI Counter Plan, which solves for the harms caused by AI use in predictive policing or just the predictive policing critique, where you vote neg as a rejection of predictive policing as a whole, which we have proved is a violent policing tactic used to control select groups in society. They should have just defended a ban of AI if they were not prepared to defend the good they see in AI. Again, a restriction is not a ban. In fact, a restriction suggests they see some value in AI and predictive policing. However, again, we have shown how AI only makes predictive policing worse. You really ought to reject both in this debate. I also want to make it clear, AI and predictive policing will never be neutral. These systems rely on the data fed into the system, and that data will always be subject to human bias.
All right, with that, our judges are now beginning deliberations. So while they are tallying up their scores and we are waiting for a winner to be announced, I would like to highlight some people who haven't yet really had a chance to speak today. First, I would like to thank the coaches for both teams. I'd like to thank Juliet Salah, who was coaching the Suffolk team in a pinch for us, because Suffolk's full-time debate coach, who obviously does an excellent job with his debaters, is Frankie Rosari, who is actually coaching our Opinionated Minds team. Would very much like to thank Frankie, Juliet, and the Suffolk University team for stepping in for us. For people who aren't in the know, this debate was scheduled for about a month ago. That was going to be against a different university that we had to reschedule. So they should get tremendous credit and be recognized for stepping in on very short notice and doing a really excellent job. Also, as with all of our NPDL teams, we had alternate debaters for the Opinionated Minds team, and alternates are completely indispensable for getting our teams ready. They help fact check people's arguments, they do research, they help with practice debates. And so I would like to recognize Sharon, Courtney, Miranda, and Victoria for all of their work helping get the opinion. And with that, as we always do, I'd like to open the floor if there's anyone from either team who would like to speak about what this event has meant to them, or just talk about the debate generally.
One with few words is okay. Hi, everybody. So I know this is my second year on the debate team. I appreciate you guys coming out, stepping in the last minute. And to these lovely teammates over here, you guys all stuck with it throughout till the end. Even though we've had ups and downs and everything, but I'm proud of everybody. And thank you all for coming.
First off, I want to say, great job, guys. Awesome debate. Very fun to debate against you guys. But this is, I think most of us second or third time now debating with the NPDL. It's always a different experience, but it's always really unique. It's not the same as your average debate, but I think it's a really, really important thing that we are able to do. And, I'm really thankful. I think it's no secret that considering both of our coaches are pretty involved with the league at this point, that we're big fans of, what you guys do and everything that we can accomplish with this. But I think it's always a really enlightening experience. It always generates a lot of conversations that go very far beyond just where we are right now. So I think this is a really important program, and we're always happy to participate and support however we can. And it's always great to have a good debate. I did not know anything about, predictive policing and the use of AI before this. So I think, if I take nothing away from this other than the information that we've learned from that, I think it's certainly worth it, but definitely thankful for you guys, especially on a Sunday, coming to debate against us. And thank you for everyone that came to watch. It's really been a really unique, but a really important day. Thank you.
Quickly on the subject of uniqueness, do also have to highlight the Maine Department of Corrections for facilitating this, for helping us with tech setup, and just for taking the courageous step to allow these sorts of events to happen in their facility. I was part of the first NPDL team, the flagship team that was done through the Maine Department of Corrections, and we had debaters from multiple different facilities, both male and female, who were all allowed to come together in the same room for the debate. And I'm sure most of the people who are watching and who are here today will understand how unbelievable that is, because that is not something that is normally ever done without somebody getting yelled at. So I really appreciate the Maine Department of Corrections, and they deserve a shout out today for the. We have a decision, or are we still? Dan, do we have a decision?
Oh, I'm sorry. No, we have time. So if anyone else would like to speak to this experience, please.
I'm sorry, we're still working on the numbers, sorry.
No worries.
No rush, no rush. I'm gonna make sure you get that math right.
Yeah, that's
Everybody for commenting, especially you guys. Thank you. That was great. And this one on all that really threw us through the ball. So I had some mark in front of me. Thanks for challenging me like that. It was awesome. We'll continue doing this.
I want to congratulate both teams. As y'all have figured out, this is quite an interesting setup with Frank coaching one team, me coaching the other team. But I know for many of us, it's our second time actually here in May. And I can't tell you how much I sent a text. Frank and I started a group chat and we were like, guys, we got to get to Maine. And immediately these five were like, we're on it, we'll go. And so I really can't thank you guys enough for coming up here in Maine on such short notice and being such good sports about it. And then amazing debate. It's always so fun to be here, and I know I've seen some of y'all before, so it's great seeing you guys again. As always, this is an amazing event, so thank you, Daniel, and all the people in the NPDL as well for continuing to do this. And Frank, it was an honor going head to head with you.
Anyone else?
Don't get shy now.
Yeah, I'm getting looks of fear from some people. So I had the privilege of being involved in all of the Opinionated Minds team meetings, going back for the past several months. And I cannot understate how proud I am of all of you, especially given the fact that Suffolk came in here and threw you all a counter plan that I know you did not spend a lot of time preparing for, and I know that you guys did a very good job responding to it. So very, very good job.
how you doing, Stefan? I think was waiting for your numbers now.
Okay, so we're just waiting on one more. I'd also like to thank everyone in the crowd who came out today to support these events. It's really, really cool that we get to fill up the visit room with people for these. The first NPDL debate we did was virtual, which was still very, very cool, but it's not quite the same as actually having a crowd here. And also, again, thanks to the Maine Department of Corrections for allowing residents to come here and watch in person, because again, that's not something they have to do, but they should choose to do that. And I think that that's really important.
They're almost ready to make their announcement.
Yeah, see something with the technology. So a little bit about.
For me, sorry, Ron, I had emailed it to Ron, sorry. Did you not get it?
Sorry, I didn't go to my email. I was looking in the chat for your.
Oh, okay,
I'm
but
sorry,
you got
I'll
it, right?
find it. I'm going to.
We are expanding all the time and are trying to grow as much as possible. So unfortunately, I don't have any upcoming debates to shout out because this is our last debate of the season, but we will be back with more debates in the fall, let's be honest.
So I'm ready. I can send.
Hey, Ron,
Yep.
just give me 1 minute. We have one more speaker and then we're gonna have you announce, you guys, the judges can speak and announce the winners, okay?
Okay, great.
Sorry about that.
No, I'll get some work done.
Real quick,
It's not easy running this webinar, I
Clarence.
just want you to know.
right, I am the community outreach coordinator, director, all those special names that we often use to feel a little bit better about ourselves. I am strictly human, just know that. I just want to say one thing, amazing job. Amazing job, I know the dedication you guys put in. We appreciate it. You guys as well at showing up, doing what you do. Definitely appreciate that. I don't think both sides really get what happens here, right? Because I know what it's like to be on this side where you feel you're not in society, right? That you feel like you're left out. But on this side, I also get to see this side now, right? And how they want to make you feel included. And sometimes I think we lose bridging that gap, right? So what you do is definitely important because not only do you help them, but you help yourselves and vice versa. So I just wanted to get up and say that because it is important. Without that, I don't think we would have changed.
Talk that talk, Clarence.
Right? Because we've been doing this now forever. We started in the same situation. And now when I came home, I felt a little more comfortable approaching people. Now I can sit around you guys and actually feel like I belong. So I get to belong to both sides. So just know when you come home, you are accepting what you do matters. And there are people who care. Right? And like we say, you know, do what you do. Do what you do because our recidivism rate is pretty well. We can prove that what we do actually works. Okay? That's great. One last thing I always say, the little guy right here, right? Can't communicate too well, right now.
Yeah.
At his size, if he throws a fit because he can't communicate properly, right? What happens? Nobody really gets hurt. With 200 pounds on that, and I can't properly communicate, things can actually break. So it's important for both sides. Bridges the gap, brings us close and helps us both. With that, thank you. Thank you. Time is one of the most valuable commodities we have in the world. Use it wisely. Right. Thank you.
All right. All right, so we're gonna announce the judge. We're gonna have the judges.
I'll now turn it over to the judges to announce the decision.
The floor is yours, Ron, and any other judges who'd like to speak.
Allow me to go first. If it, thank you all for this. I've been involved with debates. I was trying to count up the years. I think I started in the 8th grade was my first debate, and I've been sort of involved either as a coach or a participant or a friend to the activity, or someone who researches the activity, all my life. Well, since about roughly 1970, I think it was 6-ish or so, 1977, I think is roughly my 8th grade. But anyways, this is really one of those special occasions for me in which I get to see the value of my activity move out into the broader world and to be of value to everybody who might not have always gotten to access it in their junior high school or their high schools or their college. So thank you all for organizing this. Thank you for the National Prison Debate League. These are exactly the kind of things I've always wanted the activity to be a part of, and I was honored to be a part of it today. In the end, it is a 3-0 for the negative. The totals are roughly, well, I think I counted them right. The negative scored 329 points. The affirmative about 318 points. Just briefly for myself, I think there were sort of two kind of variations on the counter plan. One being against all predictive policing, and one being banning all AI. And I think it's right. Everyone had a pretty good sense of we're all in agreement of the problem. What we didn't get quite enough from the affirmative team was some of the advantages of keeping AI, particularly or even a regulated AI, in the context of the other counterplan about datification and predictive policing being a very bad idea anyways, right? And so we got a little bit of it at the end that, well, maybe there are some advantages to it. But I think in the end, as I added up all the points working through that argument, at least for me, I found myself a little bit more persuaded in the end that it's the whole apparatus that needs to be sort of gotten rid of. So that led me to have a few more points for the negative team.
Yeah.
Kate or Stefan, did you want to add anything?
Kate, you want to?
Yeah, I wanted to do sort of two big broad lessons, and one from the person who spoke right before Ron. I didn't catch your name, but the ability to advocate and articulate a position is such an essential skill. And it was wonderful to sit and listen to 10 incredible advocates stand up and, based on research they had done, present an argument for which they had reasons. And that is incredibly impressive. And I applaud all of you all. And like I wrote in chat, I know I learned a lot more about AI in policing than I knew before the debate. The second thing, though, when it comes to advocacy, as important as learning how to sort of stake your own ground is listening to what the other side's position is. And I think this speaks to what Ron was saying. In other words, it's not just speaking that's an important component of communication and debate, but listening is too. And what really was intriguing to me was the number of times the other side read a piece of evidence that actually worked better for the team they were reading it against. And so there were times when the affirmative team was reading evidence that pretty much said all AI is bad. And there were times when the negative team read evidence that says, if you get rid of AI, they'll actually revert to even worse forms of policing. And so my encouragement to all of you is keep up the research, keep up thinking through how to advocate for your own positions, but then keep also working on that next skill of really hearing what people who disagree with you say, because a lot of the times you may find out they don't disagree with you as much as you think they do, or the grounds for their disagreement actually help support your own argument. And for me, it was, I think, the second to the last negative speaker who did some of that work, where they basically said, look, we agree on a whole bunch of stuff in this debate. And given what we agree on, our approach to the counterplay ban works better. And so this is to sort of encourage you all to do all the research so you can get and understand the arguments. But at some point, be willing to set aside reading other people's evidence that you found. It's really cool that you did. And take some time to listen to evidence someone who opposes you is offering and really think about, is that evidence better for your position or for theirs? But again, really cool to listen to you all, really impressive to see the research everyone had done. And just keep remembering to not just stand up and advocate for your own position, but listen to what an opposing side might be arguing, because sometimes it might help you more than it helps them.
Yeah, I would just kind of follow up in agreement with both what was said there, and maybe just add kind of two small twists. The first negative speaker, you talked about, how it could be beneficial, right, compared to maybe human. Because there's two things going on, right? There's identification of people with AI, which has been problematic, right? And then there's the predictive policing itself. But sometimes people do forget that humans have a lot of these same issues, right? And potentially manifest themselves in even more problematic ways than kind of is done by AI, right? Sometimes people compare AI to the ideal world and find that AI is bad, right? But if you look at the real world, it might not be so bad. So it was really the negative who first kind of said, well, it might be good, and then kind of followed that immediately with kind of the counter plan to get rid of the AI and all the predictive policing. So watch that. I think the second thing is that the affirmative just because you have regulation, right? Like AI isn't like a static thing, right? It's evolving rapidly and changing rapidly. And like for example, right, you say that faces basically of certain races are often misidentified. That's really because there's not enough data. Most of the imaging that's done is done of white people, right? So that's something that can improve over time with the AI and with regulation, right? Like you could make it better. You could capture some of the benefits, including, I think as Kate was pointing out, to point out, hey, that, the negative kind of established some of these benefits. The final thing I'll say is, like in any debate, there's usually kind of points of agreement and points of disagreement. And a lot of times you can, you just kind of towards the end of the debate, like, the first debate, like beginning of the debate, there's all these speeches and arguments, stuff's coming out. But like as the debate goes on, you can start to look for points of agreement. You're all agreeing that, this is problematic in really the same ways, like your evidence, right? Think it, as was being said. So, okay, where's the point of disagreement, right? The only, what matters really at the end is, should we have a total ban or a regulation? All kind of in the concluding speeches, you didn't need to kind of spend so much time on the problems because you were really kind of agreeing with each other, and then kind of say, okay, well, this is the point. Look in a debate or any kind of, it can be an academic debate or just a disagreement you're having with somebody, right? What are the points of agreement? What's the point of disagreement? And then kind of focus on that. But it was really impressive. You really hit on all the major issues. I enjoyed listening.
If Suffolk wants to come up and receive the trophy. I'll keep it if you don't want it.
We gotta get a picture, we gotta get a trophy picture of everybody, the champ. And, like the trophy, yeah, and you're gonna have to do the congratulatory post and all that stuff. You know what you're doing. All right, thanks, guys. So we're gonna sign off. Thanks again.
Did really good.
Everybody, if I